The wind screamed through Hollow Creek, rattling the old wooden shutters like restless hands. Rain hammered down, blurring the world outside into a gray, endless sheet. Inside the house, Sarah moved quietly, her bare feet pressing against the cold, creaking floorboards. She had been alone for hours, yet she felt watched, as if invisible eyes were tracking her every step. A sudden gust of wind blew through the broken window, extinguishing the candle in her hand. Darkness swallowed her instantly, thick and heavy, pressing against her chest. Sarah's breath quickened. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted, twisting into shapes that seemed alive. A faint whisper echoed through the hallway. "Sarah." It was soft, almost too soft, yet it made her blood freeze. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Only the faint outline of furniture appeared and disappeared in the dim moonlight sneaking through the cracked windows. Thunder boomed, shaking the walls, and lightning lit the room for a brief moment. In that flash, she saw it. A tall, dark figure standing at the end of the hallway. It didn't move, but its presence made her stomach tighten. Felt patient, waiting. Her voice trembled as she shouted, but the storm swallowed her scream. The figure flickered, then vanished like smoke, leaving behind a silence that screamed louder than the storm. Sarah's hands shook as she tried the front door. It was locked. She rattled it desperately, but the lock held fast. Then, slowly, she heard the creak of hinges. The door opened on its own, revealing the storm outside, the wind tearing at the curtains, the rain like needles on her skin. A voice whispered again, this time right behind her ear. "You shouldn't have come." She spun around, heart hammering, but no one was there. The house groaned, the floorboards bending under invisible weight. The shadows along the walls grew longer, darker, reaching for her. Sarah realized she was not alone. Something was inside with her, watching, waiting, and whatever it was, it had been waiting for this very night, waiting for her. Her stomach twisted with fear as she understood. The house didn't want her to leave. Sarah's hands trembled as she moved deeper into the house. The hallways twisted like a maze, walls bending and stretching in ways that made no sense. Every step echoed, but sometimes she could hear another sound, soft footsteps following her. She dared not look back. The shadows along the walls seemed thicker here, darker, almost reaching for her as she passed. She stumbled upon a door she had never seen before. It was small, old, and heavy with a rusted lock. Something about it made her stomach tighten. A strange pull urged her to open it. She tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. Panic rose in her chest. Then, as if obeying some invisible command, the lock clicked open on its own. Sarah froze. The room beyond was dark, colder than the rest of the house. The air smelled of wet earth and something else. Something rotten, like decay. In the center, a single chair faced the corner. Its wood was scratched and worn, as though countless people had sat there before, their fears etched into it. Sarah took a cautious step inside. Her breath made small clouds in the freezing air. On the floor, she saw scratches, words, drawn in a trembling hand. "I see you. I know you." Her heart raced. She wanted to leave, but her feet wouldn't move. The shadows in the corners shifted, forming shapes that seemed human but stretched, twisted in impossible ways. The whispering returned, louder now, filling the room. "Stay, stay forever." Sarah's eyes darted around. The chair moved, slowly rocking back and forth as if someone unseen was sitting there. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her own reflection in the cracked mirror across the room stared back at her, but her reflection wasn't alone. Behind it, a dark figure crouched, its hollow eyes boring into her soul. A sudden chill made her shiver violently. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the lock clicked once, twice, sealing her inside. The whispering grew louder, echoing from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Shadows crept closer, curling around her legs like snakes. Sarah backed into the corner, terrified, knowing in her heart that the room had chosen her. The house was no longer just a house. It was alive. And tonight, It had trapped her. Sarah pressed her back against the wall, shivering. The shadows in the locked room seemed to pulse with life, crawling across the floor like thick, black smoke. Her eyes darted to the cracked mirror on the far wall. At first, it was just her reflection, pale, wide-eyed, terrified. But then, something moved behind her. She gasped. A second face appeared in the mirror, pale and twisted, with hollow eyes that stared straight into hers. It grinned, a slow, cruel smile that made her stomach twist. Sarah spun around, heart hammering. But there was no one there, only the empty, frozen room. The reflection raised a hand, and Sarah felt her own hand move as if pulled by invisible strings. She tried to pull away, but her limbs betrayed her. The face in the mirror laughed softly, a sound that sent icy needles through her chest. "You can't hide, you belong to us." Fear consumed her. She stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. It fell with a loud crash, but even that sound didn't seem to startle the mirror's figure. The shadow in the corner twisted, growing taller, leaning closer to her reflection, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. Sarah felt her mind slip, the room bending, the walls breathing, as if the house itself were alive and watching her every move. The reflection's grin widened, showing rows of teeth she knew weren't human. Her own mouth opened, but no scream escaped, only silence. The shadows crept closer, snaking around her ankles, tugging, pulling. Every instinct told her to run, but the room was endless, stretching and folding, keeping her trapped. Sarah's trembling hand reached for the mirror, desperate to touch it, to understand what was happening. The surface rippled like water beneath her fingers. Cold tendrils shot out, wrapping around her wrist. She tried to pull back, but they held fast, dragging her closer to the glass. The reflection's hollow eyes stared deeper into hers, and she felt herself being pulled inside, into a world of darkness and whispers. The voice came again, louder now, echoing inside her mind. "You are ours, forever." Sarah's vision blurred. The shadows swirled, the mirror shivered, and the room seemed to exhale, alive and hungry. Her chest tightened as a realization gripped her heart. This was not a mirror. This was a doorway, and it was opening. Sarah stumbled backward from the mirror, her breath ragged, her heart pounding like a drum. The shadows in the corners had grown taller, stretching toward the ceiling, curling around the walls like living smoke. They whispered her name over and over, a chorus of voices that made her skin crawl. "Sarah, Sarah, stay with us." The room seemed to breathe, the walls moving imperceptibly, bending closer with each passing second. The floor groaned under invisible weight, and cold fingers of air brushed her face, chilling her to the bone. Sarah tried to run, but the hallway beyond the room had vanished. Where the door once stood, there was only a wall, black, wet, and pulsing as if alive. A shadow slid along the wall toward her, slow, deliberate, making no sound except the soft, wet squelch of something moving over the wood. Sarah pressed herself against the corner, her hands covering her ears, trying to block out the whispers that now spoke of her deepest fears. "You can't escape. We know your secrets." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in stark white light. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The walls were crawling with faces, hundreds of them, twisting, screaming silently. Mouths opened and closed, eyes blinked and stared, all at once. The shadows reached toward her, stretching long, spindly fingers that scraped against her skin. She stumbled, falling onto the cold floor, and the shadows recoiled for a moment, then surged forward like waves of black water. She scrambled to her feet and ran blindly, but the floor seemed to shift under her. Corridors twisted, doors disappeared, ceilings lowered. The house was no longer a building. It was a trap. Every step she took was guided by the shadows, forcing her deeper into the darkness. Her own breath echoed, loud and panicked, mixing with the whispers, until she could not tell where she ended and the house began. Then she saw it. A door, small and ancient, barely hanging on rusty hinges. It looked different from the others, almost welcoming. But Sarah knew better. Every instinct screamed that it was a lure, away deeper into the house's grasp. Trembling, she reached for the doorknob. The shadows stopped, as if waiting, and the whispers fell silent. The door creaked open, and a cold, dark air poured out, carrying a smell of rot and wet earth. Beyond it, something was moving, waiting, watching. Sarah swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. Sarah's hands shook as she pushed open the creaking door. A thick, cold air rushed out, carrying a stench of decay and damp soil. Her legs trembled, but curiosity and fear forced her forward. The staircase leading down was narrow, steep, and dark. Each step groaned under her weight, echoing through the empty space below. At the bottom, she found herself in a basement she had never seen before. The walls were lined with shelves, cluttered with broken toys, cracked dolls, and rusted tools. Shadows danced across the room, moving in ways that made no sense. The air was heavy, almost alive, pressing against her chest like a hand trying to push her down. In the far corner, a rocking chair moved slowly, creaking back and forth on its own. Sarah's heart leaped. Her mind screamed to leave, but her feet froze. Then she saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness. A woman, or at least something like a woman. Her hair was matted, hanging in wet strands over her pale, gray face. Her eyes were black holes, hollow and endless. Her smile was wide, cruel, showing sharp teeth that glinted even in the faint light. Sarah tried to step back, but her feet refused. The figure hissed, a low, wet sound that echoed through the basement. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, moving closer. The shadows around it stretched, curling towards Sarah, twisting into shapes that looked like clawed hands and snarling faces. The dolls on the shelves seemed to twitch, their cracked eyes following her every move. Panic overtook her. She turned, racing toward the stairs, but the basement had changed. The staircase had vanished, replaced by a wall covered in scratches, deep and bloody. Every corner seemed to whisper her name. The figure's hand reached out slowly, gliding through the air, closer, colder than ice. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the cold fingers brushing her skin without touching her. Her chest heaved as she stumbled backward, the figure gliding silently behind her. The room seemed endless, walls stretching farther than possible, filled with shadows and whispers. Sarah realized with a sinking horror that the house was not just alive. It was hunting her, testing her fear, savoring it. And the basement was its favorite place. Sarah stumbled blindly through the basement, her hands brushing against damp walls. Every step made a squelching sound, as if the house itself were bleeding. The shadows followed her, twisting and stretching like living snakes, reaching out to drag her down. Whispers filled the air, repeating her fears in 1,000 voices. "You can't leave. You belong to us." She spun around, desperate for any exit. The door she had come through was gone. The basement had shifted, becoming larger and darker, corridors forming where walls had been. The ceiling lowered, pressing down, threatening to crush her. Panic surged. Her mind screamed for escape, but the house had trapped her in its maze. A flicker of movement caught her eye. At the far end of the room, a faint outline of stairs appeared. She ran toward them, her heart hammering. Each step seemed to stretch farther than it should, as if the house were bending time and space to keep her inside. The shadows surged, curling around her legs, pulling her back, but she fought free, kicking and clawing at the air. The stairs ended abruptly at a wall of black stone. Sarah froze, her chest heaving, terror consuming her. The whispers had grown louder, shouting her name now, angry and mocking. She pressed her hands against the wall, and the stone shivered under her touch. Slowly, a crack appeared, spreading until a narrow doorway formed. The smell of fresh air reached her. Hope ignited, fragile and burning. She crawled through the narrow passage, the shadows clawing at her heels, whispering threats she could barely hear. The passage twisted and turned, finally opening into a small courtyard. The storm outside had ceased, leaving only mist and pale moonlight. Sarah stumbled forward, falling onto the cold, wet ground. Relief washed over her, but she could still feel the house watching, alive and hungry. Behind her, the door to the basement slammed shut. The shadows recoiled but did not vanish. They lingered, waiting, whispering in the silence. Sarah's legs trembled as she ran toward the forest beyond the house, never looking back. She thought she had escaped, but a cold finger of dread gripped her heart. The house had not finished with her. It never finished with anyone who entered. Sarah ran, but she knew the truth. The house would follow, and tonight, it had learned her fear. Sarah ran through the misty forest, her legs shaking, her lungs burning. The ground was wet, slippery, and uneven, but she didn't care. All that mattered was putting distance between herself and the house. Behind her, she thought she heard it. A low, echoing groan, as if the house itself were stretching its long, dark arms after her. The trees swayed in the pale moonlight, shadows twisting in shapes that looked alive. Every rustle of leaves made her heart leap. Was it the wind, or something else? She tried to convince herself it was just the storm's aftermath, but a whisper slid through the air, soft and cold. "We never let anyone leave." Sarah's head snapped around, but the forest was empty. Mist curled at her feet, hiding the ground and hiding horrors she couldn't see. Her mind raced. She had escaped the house, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like a second skin. She stumbled and fell into the mud, scrabbling to her feet, coughing and crying, desperate to put the forest between herself and the nightmare behind her. Suddenly, the whisper came again, closer this time, chilling her blood. "Sarah?" It sounded almost gentle, but inside, it carried a threat that made her knees buckle. She tried to scream, but her voice cracked and faltered. Ahead, a faint light flickered between the trees. A road, maybe her only hope. She ran toward it, but the shadows along the forest floor seemed to rise, moving against her, wrapping around her heels, tugging, slowing her. Her heart pounded as she finally reached the edge of the trees. The road lay before her, empty and silent. Relief surged, but it was short-lived. From the mist behind her, a figure emerged. Pale, tall, eyes hollow and black, moving without sound. Sarah froze. The shadow followed her every movement, gliding closer with each heartbeat. She turned, and her vision caught something terrifying. The house was gone, but its darkness remained. A single shadow detached from the mist, crawling toward her like living smoke. The whisper came again, soft, yet piercing. "You can never escape. We are always here." Sarah screamed, but it was swallowed by the night. She ran onto the empty road, her body trembling, her mind screaming. Somewhere deep in the mist, the shadow watched, waiting, hungry. The house might be gone, but its horror had followed her into the world outside. Sarah knew one truth now, chilling and certain. The nightmare had not ended. Never ends.